I wanted to talk to you, Candice, about your journey.
Candice Chirwa is powerfully known as the Minister of Menstruation.
This neglect prompted me to embark on my journey on changing the narrative of period stigma.
How did this journey begin?
I think it's a journey that I had never really seen myself in. Not really creating and distributing period products, but educating and changing social norms around menstrual health. I think QRATE really just skyrocketed to something that I never expected it. We were able to have workshops in different institutions, different organizations in the first 6 months. And then COVID came.
Hey, I'm Josh Dillon. So, first of all, I just wanted to thank you for taking the time to watch this episode. Before we jump into the next podcast, I just want to take a quick moment to explain to you why we started the Periodically. 4 years ago, I founded a company with the goal of connecting Africa to the digital economy and the world to Africa. Over time, we realized that this challenge was a lot greater than what we had expected. In order for us to achieve this vision, it required something extremely important: community. It takes a village. That's why we started the Periodically, to create a space where we can interview and profile the members of our community and share how they are connecting themselves to the economy and others too. So that's how the Periodically became a thing. We made this podcast with the hope of illuminating what is possible for our people and inspiring you to join the African wave yourself. So, I'm gonna tell you a little bit more about what this vision is, but I'm gonna tell you at the end of the podcast, and I'm gonna let you know how you can get involved too. Until then, let's hop onto the wave. Let's start this journey of elevating Africa. It's a pleasure having you here. Let's get into it.
Welcome back to the C.Cast. We are on episode 12, and today I've got a phenomenal guest with us today. We've got Candice Chirwa, who is the host. Well, she takes up multiple roles. She's the host of Periodically Speaking podcast. She's the host of a popular YouTube series called Cramping My Style that's featured a whole variety of individuals in the entertainment space, and the founder of a nonprofit called QRATE. She is more well known by her unique nickname, the Minister of Menstruation. And it is an absolute pleasure to have you here today, Candice, on the C.Cast. Welcome.
Thank you for having me. I feel like I needed some form of lights that come through with the disco, and then someone just going, "Bah, bah, 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 bah," you know.
Oh, I got the
Thank you for
awesome
having
stuff.
me.
No, it's an absolute pleasure having you here today. So,
Mhm.
yeah, I wanted to chat to you today because we've known each other for a while, and I've had the privilege of being able to see your journey from day one and to where you have gotten to today, working on these huge campaigns, whether it be Lillette's or Nedbank or being the ambassador of WWF, or trustee of WWF Foundation. It's crazy the things that you've been doing, and seeing you from the beginning up until now has been an absolute pleasure. And I really wanted to explore some of that journey with you because I think it's so important for us as young people to be able to have a platform where we share the successes and how we've managed to overcome certain challenges to get there, right? Because we often on social media all the time and we see all these amazing things that people are doing. We don't get to see the behind the scenes. And
Yeah.
that's kind of what this podcast is about. It's about talking about some of those challenges that we have people has been facing in order to get where we are today, and the lessons that we've learned, and showcasing that it is possible even though you're going through challenges and you might find certain things that you're dealing with tough right now. It is possible to get to the point where you can work with big brands, where you can tap into digital communities and create digital communities of your own, like the one that you've created. And
Yeah.
there's a lot of people out there that are looking for these opportunities, so that's why we have you here today. And I wanted to talk to you, Candice, about your journey from menstruation to entrepreneurship.
Yeah.
How did this journey begin?
It's it's interesting because I think it's a journey that I had never really seen myself in. Because obviously my journey, my work is really isn't tied to menstrual health. When I had my first period, I definitely don't think I was going to see myself doing menstrual health work that moment that I had my first period. But I think sometimes the universe will align you to things that you often would probably doubt, but then passion fills you and curiosity drove me to the work that I do today. Um, so I think what's really interesting about it is I wear many hats, and I change those hats on a day, like not even a daily basis, within a day. So I can either be an academic, I can be the activist, I can be the founder and director, or I can be the content creator. And it was the academic that really discovered the entrepreneurship side of menstrual health, in that not really creating and distributing period products, but educating and changing social norms around menstrual health. And honestly, it was something that to be honest, I thought that Curate wasn't really going to succeed after a year. I'd made like this sort of promise to myself to get it off the ground with the workshops, to say, the next 6 months to a year, let's see how many workshops we can do. Let's see what happens. But if it doesn't work, then at least we tried. And in those 6 months, I think Curate really like just skyrocketed to something that I never expected it. We were able to have workshops in different institutions with different organizations in the first 6 months. And all of this work was pro bono. Obviously, as a nonprofit, we have to do work for public good. But it was a sacrifice and risk that I took to say, no money's going to come into the institution. And that's fine, right? We're doing it for passion. We're doing it to change sort of like people's lives, for impact. And then COVID came. And so with COVID, it meant we couldn't do in-people workshops. There's nothing we could do. And I think for me, that was just like, okay, this will really make or break my decision as to whether I want to continue, the conversation around QRATE and the conversation around menstrual health from an educational perspective. But strangely enough, with COVID, we saw the shift around how people were then living their lives isolated. And now there was some form of attention as to how people were living their lives and dealing with their period. And QN comes in, the Minister of Menstruation, right? And I think then that was a really great time for me to really leverage on having conversations, sharing tips. I did a lot of threads during that time, and brands now, such as Lillette's, wanted to do work with me. And that was really like cool, because now I could tap into this creative side of me of creating content, but for social good. So fast forward now to 2023, where I have the balance of social good content creation, but also doing the work on the ground as the founder and director of Curate. And it's a really lovely balance, because still to this day, I'm very passionate about menstrual health. I always tell people that I can spend 3, 4, 5 hours having conversations around period poverty because it's so fascinating. But yet I've decided to make it a career. And there are some organizations that see the value and impact, but it's not easy, right? And I love that you open the conversation to say, often people always see the success, but never see the behind the scenes, the sleepless nights, the mental health challenges that you have. And so I'm really keen to have that conversation about the realities of running a nonprofit, but also trying to like figure it out in a world where it seems like everyone's got it together, because it's not easy. So yeah, I love the work that I do, and I genuinely think that is purely my purpose, like to do what I love, and I love what I do. And that's how I define my purpose. Like every time I wake up, I'm not driven by money. I'm driven by the impact that I want to bring to people's lives. And yeah, I hope that's a great opener for people to sort of get an understanding of who I am and the reason I do the work that I do.
Yeah, no,
Yeah.
that's fantastic story that you've just shared with us. And
Mm.
some of the things that I picked up on that really stick out to me is that COVID element, how that completely transformed the way that you view what it is that you're doing and how you implement it as well. And
Mm.
it's so crazy because a lot of the time in South Africa, we go through a lot of nonsense in South Africa. I always say to people, South Africa is a movie. We
A
always
movie.
with the craziest things, whether it be like pipelines blowing up or
Mm-hmm.
people's phones getting robbed or whatever
Mm-hmm.
it may be. There's just so much happening in South Africa, and it's so easy to kind of just be so negative about it and complain. We're dealing with load
Mm-hmm.
shedding on a daily basis. The economy is in tatters. People can't find jobs. So because of the environment that we find ourselves in, a lot of the times it becomes easy to just kind of be like beat down and just very
Mm-hmm.
negative, have very negative outlook. But
Mm-hmm.
what I find really interesting about what you're saying is like we could take all these negative things that we're experiencing and we could put COVID right into that box as well. But from the story that you're telling me about some good that came out of that negative experience that we experience globally, right?
Mm.
And that is something that I think is very important to highlight, because with all the challenges that we face, I mean, Jack Ma came to South Africa a few years ago, and he said that South Africa, or sorry, not South Africa specifically, I have to emphasize that it's Africa as a whole, is the hub, is going to be the hub for innovation in the future. And the
Mm.
reason why he said that is because of all the challenges that we face, because of all the constraints that we deal with, whether it be COVID, which is a global constraint that we dealt with, or whether it be lack of electricity, or whether it be lack of access to technology, or lack of jobs. That box that we are put in forces us to be creative. It forces us to be innovative. And that's why I love having these conversations, and also why I personally have stayed in South Africa, because all of the challenges that we're facing in Africa as a continent provides
Mm.
a huge opportunity for us to find solutions to those challenges. And
Yeah.
through finding solutions to those challenges, we create solutions that can be exported abroad. And if
Yeah.
we're able to solve other problems abroad, that comes back to our continent in the form of monetary trade, right? So
Definitely.
these are things that are very important to me personally as well. I've been the founder
Mm.
of J Innovations, and our goal being connecting creativity and technology to connect Africa to the digital economy. That's kind of the conversations that we want to be having. So you mentioned COVID kind of like switched up the way that you work. Could you dive a little bit deeper into that and how it changed the way that you work?
And I also love like what you say about how we are creatively responding to problems in South Africa. And I also just want to emphasize, every time people say, yo, South Africa is the worst country in the world, I say, no, South Africa is a great country just going through a bad time. Like, we have to recognize that there will always be seasons of instability and seasons where we have to be mindful of the fact that there will be challenges. And obviously, I can be very honest and say that these challenges are predominantly being driven by incompetence. And I think we are getting to that moment of awakening where we're like, we can no longer go through this. It cannot be that, we're nearing close to what? I mean, load shedding has been a thing since 2008. We're almost nearing 10 years of it. It's like, how is this even possible? Why? It just feels unnecessary. But I think with regards to your question, COVID really was an interesting time for me in balancing how to run Curate virtually, because we had to pivot. And I think what we realized is that we can't do the in-person workshops virtually. It doesn't have the same impact. We were at least blessed to have some form of like opportunity to do webinars, because everyone was in that space of wanting to engage and connect academically. And so we were able to have, those webinars, but the workshops weren't possible. And so we had to make that decision to pause it, right? And I think being content with having the decisions to pause allowed me to re-energize and reset, to say, when we eventually open up, we can now just come back to say we are back. And it was in that same year, I think October of 2020, when restrictions were a bit lower, that we're able to now have workshops with children masked up. But at the same time, as an individual, as the Minister of Menstruation, I was like, my role during this time was to create content that made people feel connected, but also made people feel educated and empowered. So the agenda and the mission of menstrual health as Candice, the menstrual activist, still remained the same, but it just looked differently. It wasn't no longer in person. It was, let's create content, and we're creating content with a brand. And I think what COVID did is that it made brands sort of leave the script of having to do digital marketing and collaborate with people that have the engagement, because that's what people wanted during COVID, the engagement, not the reach. The engagement was important for people to engage on topics, for people to check in, for people to say, okay, let's talk more about this. And that is what I think the Minister of Menstruation did really well in 2020. I mean, still does really well now, but it was that time where people were now willing to have these conversations around periods, because everyone had the time to, and also people were more mindful to say, this is something I cannot neglect every month, and I need to deal with my health and well-being, especially during this time. So I found myself in spaces of having conversations, connecting, also pushing the boundaries of trying to create content, because I'm going to be very honest, I'm not the greatest content creator. Like, I'm a great No, no.
I beg to
And you
differ.
know this personally, Josh. You know the bad luck I have every time I press record on a camera and a camera just formats itself, or I'm not good at that. Like, just it seems like bad juju happens my way when I just press record. But what I am great is, and I'm a great strategist when it comes to gender and social inclusion and how we convert that into content that is relatable to people. I am great at sort of driving a message across to say, we need to be speaking about this. And so I found myself being in a space of I need to get over my fear of creating content and find something that I'm comfortable with. And I just found that like pressing record on my phone and speaking directly to camera on a specific issue was the way I created content. I can't do all these crazy dances and transitions and things that people do. I want to, but I can't. But I've noted my strengths and weaknesses, and I think that's what really enabled me to create the brand that I have today, and that I'm able to create the content, whether it be a blog, whether it be an interview, whether it be a TikTok, and sort of have people engage on the issue, sort of have people have the initiative to search an issue, but also be like, this issue impacts me directly. What can I do? And yeah, it's been a really great pivot because I'm here now, and I really enjoy it. I really do enjoy the engagement and the conversations and the norm shifting and trying to have people think deeply about an issue. So it's fun. It's really fun.
No, it comes through in all the content that you do put out there for
Mhm.
sure. And I think that's why it resonates with people because you can tell that it is something that you're passionate about. And like you said, you're authentic in what you do. In the previous podcast, we were chatting to Milan Randall and we were talking about personal branding and what people often get wrong. And that the thing that people often get wrong is they try to be something that they're not, right? And that inauthenticity can really affect your ability to connect and engage with people. And
Mm.
that thing of engagement is such an important thing. I want you to tell me a little bit more. Like you mentioned a lot about engagement, and that's what brands want. Do you
Mm.
feel like we're talking in the context of COVID, which was about like 2, 3 years ago? Fast
Yeah.
forward to today. Do you think that engagement thing is still what's so important? And if it is, why? Why? What is this engagement, and why do you keep mentioning it?
Yeah, with something that requires people to use a product or requires people that like on an issue that impacts them directly, engagement is so important. I think there's a difference between how we look at generating awareness and why reach is important, because reach is understood to be the number of people that see something, but then engagement is the conversion of people either tapping on the buy more, or people actually saying I want a book now, or people actually saying, oh, I want to do something. The engagement is the action of asking questions to drive people to do something. And I think that's what I had to sort of like learn through the process of being a content creator as a Minister of Menstruation, that I'm not driving people to see the work, like yes, see the work, but engage, like have the conversations around what is it that you can do to change end period poverty. Have the conversation to be like, as a man, what is it that I can do to be a supportive menstrual ally? Because that for me is more important, because I'm dealing with building sort of like a movement that establishes a more positive perspective and approach to something that is often seen as a taboo. So for me, the engagement is not what drives me. I mean, the reach is not what drives me. It's the engagement that does. I would rather have a post that has 100 views, but 30 comments of people asking questions, people wanting to know more, than having a post that has 1 million views and it's just like heart emoji. Because for me, I can't translate as to whether that's people are reflecting and engaging and having a conversation. I want that engagement. Like, for example, I posted recently a conversation of the importance of menstrual leave in South Africa, and I got a really negative response. One man said that women don't deserve it because we're just trying to be lazy, and I decided to post that on TikTok, and my views are low, but I have over 30 comments. And that's the engagement that I want, because people are wanting to engage on the conversation. Some people are wanting to know what is it as a concept, because that's the whole point of sort of like education. We're trying to educate people to be aware of an issue so that they can do something towards it. So that is what social good content creation looks like. If that's a term I've come up with, I'm taking it now. But
Let's
I
go.
think for
Social
me,
good content
social
creation.
good content creator. That for me is what I'm driven by. I know a lot of marketing agencies are driven by the conversion of how many followers to how many likes they can get. But I always put it out there when I'm in meetings to say, look, when you work with the Minister of Menstruation, you're most likely not going to get the likes and views, but you will definitely get the engagement because I know how to engage with people. I know how to get people talking about something that we should be talking about. I know how to raise awareness on a specific issue without trying to make it overcomplicated. Because I understand being an academic, academia can be a lot of hong hong hong, kiki haga krim kram krum. And what I try to do is take that and make it more relatable. And through that, using my social media platform is a great way to do that. So yeah, I think the advice I'd give to people who want to perhaps do social commentary, get people to talk on a specific issue, don't be driven by the numbers. Be driven by the point that you're trying to put across. What is the sort of feeling that you want people to have after they finish watching your video? And what is the call to action that people should do as soon as they done turning off the video? Those are the important things that I use as my metric when I'm creating content.
Yeah. And that thing of engagement, I just want to kind of view it from a different perspective or kind of
Mm,
change the terminology slightly because as you're talking, I'm thinking about previous podcasts that we've done and there's recurring topics that always come up. And the
mm,
one that I'm thinking of now is purpose because there's a reason why you started creating content and you spoke about how purpose is what drives you. Purpose
mm,
can only be achieved through action. And that's why engagement is important. So you get a lot of organizations that are there focused on the numbers, they focused on the likes, they focused on X, Y, and Z. But at the end of the day, whether you're viewing it from a social perspective or whether you're viewing it from a business perspective and actually like making a sale, there's action that needs to happen in order for that to be the case, right? And that's why the engagement element is so important. Tie that in with purpose, that adds meaning to it, which adds a whole nother layer. And I think that's what you've done really well is you've managed to tie all of these things together, whether you be working for a brand or whether you're putting out content about purpose-driven content to start conversations or open up people's eyes to a different way of thinking. There's always purpose and engagement behind that. And
mm,
that's what makes it so effective.
mm,
I want to ask you a little bit about the different pieces of content that you put out there, right?
mm.
I mentioned earlier you have a podcast that is focused on period poverty called Periodically Speaking. And then you've also got a YouTube channel show called Cramping My Style. So I
Yeah.
want to talk about those two pieces of content and how exactly they aim to break the taboos around menstruation using entertainment and combining it with education. Because I think I always talk to people and I tell them when you're putting out content, you need to hit on at least three factors, right? Or maybe you could argue maybe four. It either needs to be entertaining, educational, inspirational, or aesthetically pleasing. And if
Mm,
you can hit on a combination of those things, then you can it basically improves the impact that you can achieve through it. So through watching your content, I know that there's very much entertainment involved, especially with your cramping style, my
mm,
style show. And then you've also got your podcast. So I wanted to just ask you a little bit more about those. How did the ideas come up? And
yeah.
how do you use those as tools to implement your purpose and your vision for what you're
Mm.
doing, curate and other initiatives?
Yeah, so I'll start with periodically speaking. So that's a really interesting one. A brand, Cuckoo FM, messaged me in the beginning of the year to say that they really like the work that I do. And mind you, Cuckoo FM is like a audio platform with that makes podcasts, but they prefer to just say like, I don't know, what is it, audio? It's like an audio cast, but it's basically podcast.
Okay.
And they have a big popular demographic in America and India. And they just reached out to me on Instagram and they're like, "Hi, Minister of Menstruation, we really love the work that you do. Would you like to do a podcast?" And I was like, oh, okay, cool. And, as someone who loves engaging and chatting about things, I was just like, yeah, this sounds like a great idea. And especially if it can reach a broader audience outside of South Africa, I'm very keen to do that. And they gave me the opportunity to record season 1 with 10 episodes, 10 minutes each, which is very limiting for me, I won't lie. But it was something that we were able to do. And for me, what I was very intentional about was specifically selecting episodes that had guests that either are on the ground solving the specific issue or are in politics trying to lobby for the issue or are menstruators themselves going through the issue, right? So if I was having an episode about period pain, I would want to have an endometriosis warrior who is living through the intense period pain speak about their experience as a way to drive the narrative to say, well, this is not something that we're making up. This is real. These are lived experiences, right? If I wanted to speak to someone about how is this all tied to patriarchy and why is it a gender equality issue, let's have the founder of the Vagina Museum, who has literally gone out of her way to create a vagina museum, and talk about the issues of stigma and gender inequality, right? So I was very intentional about the guests and the message that they'd bring about. And that's been a really cool journey of producing those episodes, because it made me realize that I have a knack for just A, coming up with very punny names, but B, just knowing how to drive a form of impact and a form of feeling with a specific episode and asking the right questions in a very short format. So periodically speaking is a really great thing. And I am also trying to push that the podcast is available on all podcast platforms, because right now it's on an app, which is very limiting. And I'm always about inclusion and accessibility. But that's something that I'm trying to have internally, but it's fine. Cramping my style. Now that is something that it's one project that gives me so much anxiety, but one project that I thoroughly enjoy doing, because it's a different ball game when you're recording a podcast. You click record, then you're done, and then you do a little bit of edits. But now it's very different when you have to reach guests, write up the episodes or the script, come up with the questions, have the device charged and ready, book a venue, have the cameras recorded, cameras charged, then record, then you have to edit. That's the whole process of Cramping My Style that I am responsible for. And it's so stressful. But at the same time, when I get these people to come on, like mostly men, come on the couch and experience the period pain, the message there is to
Hey,
say,
Candice, could you explain to us what exactly people can expect when they're going to watch an episode of Cramping My Style?
oh,
Because I think some people that might
yeah,
have not seen it might not know what you're talking about.
cool. So Cramping My Style, I should have actually started off that way, but Cramping My Style is, think of it like an interview, but with period pain, and the men are connected to a device, and I basically ask them questions. Sometimes I challenge them to do something really interesting at the end, but we're trying to see whether they can do the simple thing of answering questions as a way to drive some form of advocacy towards the fact that period pain is a real thing, and that we need to be investing a lot more time and energy and resources to ending endometriosis. But I think the really cool thing about Cramping My Style is that when you go on the YouTube channel, you'll see that the subscribers are low, but the views are very high for their episodes. And for me, again, it's that engagement that matters, right? I'm not happy with the way, because you mentioned the 4 pillars of content. Aesthetically, not happy, but we try. But in terms of edutainment, as I call it, education and entertainment, it definitely hits the mark there, because I try my best to ask questions to get to know the person on the couch deeply, but also ask period questions we all should know as a way to drive education. And yeah, it's a really great series. I want season 3 to not be shot by me. I want to have a production team so that I can actually enjoy shooting and just being on the
Focus on
couch,
yeah.
you know.
Mhm.
But other than that, it's a series that I'm really excited, that I really enjoy, and I've basically been able to take Cramping My Style as a series, but apply it to different contexts. So going to radio interviews, going to comedy shows, and just have men experience period pain in general. So that's really cool.
I'm excited. I'm excited to see that show grow because I really believe in the potential that it has. I mean, and it's
Mm.
already reaching crazy numbers. So, I think what would be amazing is getting a sponsor to come on to sponsor the show so that it can add some resources into that. So you can focus on what you're good at and then get others who are good at the production side of things to focus on that. I think that will be an amazing thing. So, if there's anyone listening to this that's willing to sponsor a show and knows someone who knows someone, please let's make this happen. It would be an amazing thing to see. And touching on that topic, someone who might be a sponsor, I think it's so important for us to talk about this. And you might think this is a complete like 180, but it's not, right? And I'll explain why.
Yeah.
So I know that you are a huge Formula One fan.
Oh,
Um, because I see you on Twitter and I can see the stress that it causes, but I can also see the celebrations that it causes as well. And I wanted to ask you, like, how did you get into Formula One?
COVID. I literally
Yeah.
had nothing else to do but watch grown men drive a track in a fast car. Like I literally, and mind you, like I have really good friends who are really passionate fans for Formula One. Like they talk about DRS and this and that, and I'm just there like, woo, go Lewis Hamilton. Like that's literally like the base level of my support. But I think what was interesting about COVID is that it allowed me to really invest in like things that I wouldn't like initially try during before COVID. That I was like, okay, this is really interesting as a sport because it's much more deeper than just a driver getting in and driving a car. It's strategy, it's engineering, it's a whole lot of different things. And look, I try my best not to be involved in the politics side of Formula One because
Mhm.
F1 Twitter, that community, it's a lot. But I really do enjoy watching it as just like from an objective point of view to understand how teams strategize, how drivers turn a specific turn because it's not just like driving straight and then braking. There's strategy towards it. So it's a
Yeah.
really fascinating sport that I've come to be a fan of. But I think I'm trying to leave the sport. I won't lie. It can't be that every Sunday there are grown men that have my stress levels really high. Like my blood pressure is always high. It's too much.
Well, I'm a Manchester United supporter, so if I can deal with being like a Manchester United supporter of the last 2-3 years or however long it's actually been way longer than that since Sir
Yeah.
Alex left. If I can survive, you can survive too, Candice. I believe. The reason why I was asking, like, did
Mm,
you? I was quite surprised because look, I won't say I'm the biggest Formula One fan right now, but there also was a period of time where I was like really engaged in watching it. But
mm.
the reason why I was engaged was because of Drive to Survive. I don't know if you ever watched Drive to Survive.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of people actually got introduced to Formula
Informative.
One
Yeah.
through that series, which
Mm,
is why I wanted to talk about it because Formula One before that, really, if you look at the demographic that was watching Formula One before COVID, it was mainly like your older, middle aged white guys that were watching it.
mhm,
Now I'm talking to Candace, who's a young person of color living in South Africa watching Formula One. Like, how does that happen? And it's a
mm,
good question to ask. And it ties into the whole cramping my style conversation
mm,
because it's a perfect example about how powerful content is to change people's perspective. And if
mm.
you listen to previous podcasts, I've kind of shared my story in terms of why I got into content creation and why I'm so
Mm.
passionate about it. But ultimately, it comes down to that ability to shift perspective and to influence individual. I don't like the word influence because everyone's like, oh, influencer, and it's kind of been diluted, but
Yeah.
it's shifting action. It's creating engagement and shifting action. Now, because we've watched this series, we're going to tune in on a Sunday. We're going to go and buy Lewis Hamilton teddy bear or T-shirt or whatever it may be.
Yeah.
Like that just is such a great example of content creation and how it can
Mm.
shift people's perspectives and spark them to take action. If you look at Formula One now and you look at the demographic that is watching Formula One now, it's way more diverse. It's increased, the numbers have increased dramatically,
Yeah.
all because of the series, which sparked this whole avalanche of change in the sport.
Mm.
And the reason why I wanted to bring that up now and why it relates to cramping my style is because I want brands to hear this. I want brands to understand the impact that a piece of content can have. As long as it's well produced, you've got good people that are shooting it, that are good at storytelling, that can put together the post production in a way that communicates and keeps people engaged. You can create impact on your brand. You can shift the way people act, and you can shift the way that people spend their money.
Mm.
So I just really wanted to bring that up because I think that's like such a prime example in terms of how you can use content as a tool to kind of shift the way people see things.
I agree on how you can use content as a way to have a social message. Like content, I think people understand content to be like a lifestyle experience of like, oh, I went to this restaurant and it was incredible. And that is valid. Like I think there is its perks to vlogging and lifestyle content. But I also think that we also have to be mindful that we all live as part of this ecosystem called planet Earth, and we're all therefore socially like responsible to how we treat it, how we treat each other, and in particular how we treat specific issues that impact all of us, right? I think there's this weird culture. I don't know if you've noticed on Twitter how in South Africa with load shedding, for those that don't know, load shedding is when like we don't have power for certain hours of the day. It's really weird. It doesn't make sense, but we're here now. But we've got into this thing on Twitter with load shedding where there are load shedding connoisseurs where people are like, I prefer this slot compared to this slot. Or I like this slot because I'm not at home compared to this slot. How about no slots? Like, do you know what I'm saying? Like, we've gotten to a point where we've become so numb that we aren't realizing and recognizing that not having access to power for more than 8 hours a day that affects our productivity, that ultimately affects the economy, should be an issue that we should all be rallying about, right? So I think we need to recognize that the tools that we use as a way to specifically spread messages, spread something on awareness, also ultimately can also be a tool that can get people to rally behind a specific cause. Now, obviously, there'll be pros and cons towards those causes because, you know, for instance, you can have like a wave of misogynists that can start up their own movements, and now it's an element of now women are being attacked randomly for how they dressed. It's got its pros and cons. But I think the point for me here is I've decided as a young black girl to use my platforms as a way to drive awareness to eradicate period poverty. And I'm not always constantly dropping statistics. I'm not, because I also need to recognize that I'm human too. So if I need to like vent about load shedding, I can. But majority of the time, what you would see Candice doing is menstrual health work, because I believe that that was my purpose to do good, right? So obviously I'm not saying everyone has that bit of activism in them, but everyone can use some form of their platforms or a way of using content as a way to just address a specific issue, especially if it impacts you and your community, right? So don't underestimate that you need to have over 10,000 followers and the UN needs to be following you and you need to be sponsored by a specific brand. I started with nothing. I literally started the Minister of Menstruation with like 1,800 followers, and I started with no brand backing. Like, QRATE started with nothing. Literally, when I started our first QRATE workshop, I had 50 Rand in my bank account. I had no money at the time, but we continued doing these workshops to a point now where we can say today, QRATE has just partnered with Youth X by Nedbank, right? I can say that I've partnered with X, Y, and Z brands, but that for me isn't what drives my success. My success is the impact of the work. If I go to a school and I finish for an hour with the workshop, was that impactful? Not which brand is with me. Like, yes, it's really important. Collaboration drives scale of impact, but I'm not driven by that. I'm mostly driven by the social good, the impact, the people. So yeah, I just use social media as a way to then capture that and then also get people to also have the ability to talk about it and also share tips on how people can do something about it, because I can't end period poverty by myself. It's not possible. I need people, families, communities, they need to do something about it. So yeah, it's a really interesting thing that you mentioned about Drive to Survive. I think I only watched like one season, and then after the I'll be the Dubai scandal. I was like, never again. I'm good. Heartbreak. But it's also interesting how that can be used as a method, like popular platforms like Netflix, where a lot of people, millions of people watch content, can be driven as a way to have people get into something else, like a sport. I mean, let's talk about Tinder Swindler, for example. Everyone was talking about Tinder Swindler, and everyone was downloading Tinder because they were like, oh my goodness, this story exists. I also want to find a rich man, but I also don't want to be
Me, I want
swindled.
to swindle.
You know, it's a really weird influence, you know, like how content can be documented and packaged and then the sort of behavior traits that follow after that. So yeah,
Yeah.
content is powerful, man.
Really is. And it's
Mm,
what you're talking about. Something that's very interesting that you mentioned is it can be used both ways. You
mm,
could use content and social media as a tool for good to have positive impact in your community, in your case, in the menstruation discussions and ending period poverty. That's a positive impact, right? On the flip side, you could have negative impacts. You could have people that are using it to spread hate speech or whatever it may be, right? That highlights a very important concept. And that concept is that social media and content is a tool. It's like a hammer, right? You
mm,
could use a hammer to hit someone over the head and kill them, or you could use a hammer to build a beautiful piece of furniture that can last generations within your family and be passed down as an heirloom, right? So it really is just dependent on how you use it. The second thing that you mentioned, which I find very interesting, is belief, right? Belief in what is possible. That
mm,
is so crucial because we, as South Africans, are constantly being beat down on a daily basis. Load shedding,
mm,
crime,
mm,
corruption, whatever it may be. We are going through a lot. And I'm talking from a place of privilege, someone that lives in a good area, that lives where there's not as much load shedding or we don't deal with as many issues. Majority of our country is living in townships, are living
mm,
in areas that are being battered by water shortages, etc.,
mm,
etc. And that can really be very disheartening. And we mentioned this on the previous episode as well. Is when you are in a hopeless situation, the most important conversation that you can have is one of hope, right?
mm,
And I think those conversations of hope really come with perspective. And that's why I think it's so important that I don't know if you've traveled abroad, but I think it's so important that we all travel abroad to
yeah.
just see what is happening around the world and not because
Mm,
we live here in South Africa, we kind of get accustomed to what is here, and what is here seems normal. You go
mm,
abroad and you see, like, oh, there are women walking on the streets at 2 o'clock in the morning. What?
yeah, yeah.
How is that possible? And I know it's not possible for all of us to travel abroad, right? It's just not everyone has the financial means to. But what's beautiful about the day that we live in is that we have tools that enable us to connect with people all over the world. I can sit here right now, you and I are sitting in two different places having this conversation. You could
Mm,
be sitting on the other side of the planet, and I could be standing here in Johannesburg, and we could be having this conversation. So we've
mm,
got all of these tools that are at our disposal. It's
yeah.
just how we use the tools. What are we going to
And
use the tool for?
And on that point, like South Africa's problems, right, are easily fixable. Like you fix the unemployment crisis, you fix crime by fixing the unemployment crisis, right? You fix the healthcare issue by employing the graduates that are medical care graduates, because there's thousands of them sitting at home doing nothing. That's a major unemployment crisis. We fix the issue of our SOEs being run to the ground, deliberately so, by removing the people and ensuring that the boards that are hired by technical people, qualified people, actually have the powers to run it. Because it cannot be state owned enterprises now being taken over by politicians who have no qualifications in those specs or fields. So the issue isn't just it happens and now it's fate and it's universe that South Africa is going through bad things. It's all people driven, and it's all because people are not directing these tools and resources to make sure that it is fixed, right? We wouldn't be able to deal with like a mass shooting crisis. Like America is struggling with a mass shooting crisis. You could just be at a mall and 1 second someone is just shooting and killing people. Like we need to be at times, I think, a little bit more grateful for the things that South Africa is currently going through, and realizing that our problems are fixable. We just need to put the right people in. And it's not like I'm not trying to make this a political thing, but all of our social economic issues are tied within politics. The personal is the political, and the political is the personal, right? I cannot separate the two. The fact that I, as a menstruator, don't have access to menstrual leave at the workplace or don't have access to period products in public spaces is purely driven by politics, right? And so this is something that I think people have to be very mindful of. And I don't know if we need to be having that conversation about whether social media has allowed us to be lazy, where we're just constantly tweeting or what do we call it? Xing? What is the word now? Xing.
I call it Twitter, and I'm gonna continue calling it Twitter. I don't
Same.
care.
Sorry, Elon Musk. But we're constantly just venting our frustrations and not transforming them into actionable solutions. And I think people are like, yeah, but what does protesting do? Yeah, I mean, protesting brings awareness to a specific issue. But you can imagine if someone says we're actually shutting down the country and the whole country's involved in that because of one issue that impacts all of us, what power that will have. Let's not forget that the Arab Spring that was started in the early 2010s was started by young people using the platform of Twitter to literally use the hashtag Arab Spring, or the revolution is here, as a way to say we've had enough of what we're going through currently: high cost of living, unemployment, and crime. It was young people that started a revolution on Twitter. And so we need to realize that it's the tools that we're given that can also bring about a form of change. And I don't know if people are necessarily aware of that. So yeah, we need to do better, I think.
It's a good question to ask. How are we using our tools? Are we using it to fight with someone over an episode of Big Brother Niger? Or are
Oh.
we using it to bring about change in the environments that we are experiencing? And look, change might be different to you, right? You've spoken a lot on political change, protest, etc., etc. Change might mean something different to you. It might mean that you are going to use the tools that you have online to start a business. You're going to go and find clients in the UK and say to them, look, you have no social media following. I'm based here in South Africa. Our rand is like nothing compared to your currency. You could pay me what you pay to buy a pizza, and I
Mm,
will go and post your stuff and bring business into your company.
mm,
Boom, you've got a client that you're working with that brings income. Now you're getting paid in pounds, times that by 20. Let's see how much money we can make here. Where can we invest this money? Can we maybe increase and grow that business to the point where I'm working 20 hours a week or whatever it may be, to the
mm,
point where I'm going to go and find someone else and say, hey, I've got all this work. Come and help me. Now
mm,
you're paying that person. Now that person's not unemployed. That person is going to take that money and is going to go to the shops and is going to spend that money in the shops. Now that shop is going to make more money. They're going to go to local restaurants and buy nice food at those local restaurants. They're going to be able to build their businesses. That
mm,
creates another opportunity because now they've got budgets to get someone else to do their social media. Now you go and say, look, let me do your social media. I'm working with 10 clients in the UK. This is what we've done for them. Let me help you. So there's so many opportunities here. I don't see why we are unemployed, because we can take advantage of all these tools and make opportunities, but we need to
mm,
sit down and really ask ourselves as young people, what are we using these tools for? And
mm,
that's a very important question to ask.
mm,
So I'm glad that we had this discussion, and I hope that it can like open up people's minds to what's possible, because you and I are examples of this. Candice, you're sitting in an office in Santon right now, living your best life at WeWork. How do you get there? Through using these tools. I'm
yeah.
also sitting in Santon right now as a young person who started his own business, has never worked a 9 to 5, and
Mm,
managed to make it possible for myself. There's
mm,
no reason why someone listening to this can't do it yourselves. You just
exactly.
need to be able to think about how you're using these tools, connect yourself with the right people, and get involved. Get
Mm,
involved. And it
mm.
can make a huge change in your life. And that change can overflow into the lives of others. So,
With
yeah,
that being said, I feel like the
yeah,
name of this episode should be Creator Change. Create the change that you want to see. Okay?
yeah.
Like that is pure, simple, like period. That's all I have to say. Like you ended
That's
it
it.
on the right note. Like I feel we, yes, have the resources, but we also have to realize that we also can enable the world and the environment and communities that we want to see by speaking out about it, by doing something about it. So create the change. Don't wait for
Create
it.
period.
Exactly.
Candice, thank you so much for joining me today and for taking the time to chat with me and feature on the Cast. It's been an absolute pleasure having this conversation. I don't know if there's anything that you want to share with the people that are listening to this.
I mean, look, the work of menstrual health never stops. Like, we don't stop continuing the conversation. Our periods don't stop in August, where people think everyone should be talking about periods because of Women's Month. We're constantly doing the work every single month. We're constantly going to schools, organizations, and so if you are someone who works in an organization, or you are the boss of that organization, you're like, what can we do to change and have this conversation? Please feel free to reach out. Minister of Menstruation is the title on all social media platforms. And yeah, we're always keen to work with people. But also, if you're someone who wants to learn more about period poverty, I'm launching a blog called Flowing Wisdom. And this blog will seek to just talk about the things that we should be talking about when it comes to periods or comes to menstrual health. And I think for me, establishing that platform as a way to create that content and not wait to be interviewed was really important for me, because I deem myself as a thought leader. So I was like, why should I wait? Let me create.
Let's
That's me.
go. Thank you so much, Candice. If you made it to the end of this episode, please do not forget to like and subscribe to our channel. We are building a community here. So if you want to be involved, if some of the stuff that we've spoken about today resonates with you, please do join our community. If you go onto our links, wherever you're watching this, whether it be on YouTube or Twitter or wherever, if you find our link tree, you'll be able to see a WhatsApp group. Join that WhatsApp group, because there's literally today, there was someone saying, I need someone to help me with my social media. Who's there available? Who knows how to do it? That's a job. That's a job for someone. So we're trying to create a community where we can pay it forward to young people. And yeah, Candice, it's been an absolute pleasure. That's that. Episode 12, C.Cast. It was great having you. Cheers.
Once again, thank you so much for joining us on this episode. My hope is that we have illuminated what is possible for you. My hope is that we've inspired you to start your journey of elevating Africa in the global space. It is possible. At the beginning of this podcast, I mentioned the African wave. This is it. We are creating a platform for the elevation of Africa in the global space. If you want to join this wave, but you're not too sure where to start, I'd like to encourage you to find out more about the Creator community. Our community is founded on 3 pillars: coaching, connecting, and culture. Through these pillars, we hope to create a point of convergence for future leaders of Africa. If you are a leader and you want to be a part of this movement, please visit our website. You'll find courses of finding your online voice and see when our next networking event is coming up. We're excited for you to join our journey in connecting Africa to the digital economy. But until then, we'll see you on the next episode. Thank you for watching, and bye.